We may be raising a generation of children who are less healthy than their parents.
Obesity is just one manifestation of a much larger problem. It's called TOFI, T-O-F-I, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. Real medical term. In Asian Americans, that they're actually thin, but that they have enormous amounts of liver fat. Kids who sleep in the same room as their cell phone is charging get 28 minutes less sleep. We still have a lot of work to do to try to figure out the fiber is not the food for you. The toxicity of one Coca-Cola equals the toxicity of two Diet Coca-Colas. I like to call sleep garbage night for the brain. The last test that really, I think, personally, is the most important and needs to be done.
For the first time in history, we may be raising a generation of children who are less healthy than their parents. Children are growing up in an environment where ultra-processed foods are available 24 hours a day, while physical activity is steadily disappearing from daily life. And the consequences are becoming impossible to ignore. According to World Health Organization, childhood obesity has increased more than tenfold globally over the past 4 decades, making it one of the most serious public health challenges of our time. Think about how childhood has changed. A generation ago, children spent afternoons outdoors, running, cycling, and playing with friends. Today, many spend hours scrolling, gaming, streaming, and snacking. At the same time, research published in JAMA Pediatric has shown that excessive screen time is linked to lower physical activity, poor sleep quality, and a higher risk of childhood obesity. And increasingly, we are seeing children with conditions that were once considered adult diseases appearing in them. Fatty liver disease, insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, and metabolic dysfunctions. So the question no longer whether childhood is changing. The question is, are we raising a generation that is overloaded, undernourished, sleep deprived, and increasingly disconnected from the habits that build lifelong health? Welcome to another episode of Khan Klinics. I'm your host, Dr. Amir Khan. And today we're joined by one of the most leading experts on sugar, metabolism, and childhood health to help us understand what is going on and what parents can do about it. Because of a genetic disease, because of his diet, for years his daily meals consisted largely of potato chips, French fries, white bread, processed meat, and packaged snacks. He wasn't starving. In fact, he was consuming enough calories every day. But his body was so deprived of essential nutrients that his eyesight deteriorated until the damage became permanent. And the real story reveals one of the biggest misconceptions of our time. A child can be overfed and undernourished. A child can be overfed and undernourished at the same exact time. Today, millions of children consume diets dominated by ultra-processed foods. The question isn't whether our children are eating enough now. The question is whether the food is giving them what their bodies actually need. Welcome to another episode of Khan Klinics. I'm your host, Dr. Amir Khan. We're joined by one of the world's leading experts on sugar, metabolism, and childhood health to help us understand what's happening and what parents can do about it. Dr. Robert Lustig is a pediatric endocrinologist, a professor emeritus at the University of California, San Francisco, best-selling author, and internationally recognized expert on the effects of sugar and ultra-processed food on human health. His groundbreaking lecture, Sugar, the Bitter Truth, helped change the global conversation around sugar and its impact on health. He is also the author of influential books, including Fat Chance, The Hacking of American Mind, and Metabolic. His work challenges us to rethink how food, technology, lifestyle, and modern environments are shaping the health of our children. Robert, welcome to Khan Klinics.
Well, thank you, Dr. Khan, and thank you for that very, very lovely introduction. Appreciate it.
Most welcome. Let's start by trying to understand from you how serious is childhood obesity. Give us a comparison, or what's your thoughts on what's the magnitude of this?
Well, so let me start out by saying that obviously childhood obesity is a huge problem, and I'm not in any way belittling that. But in fact, childhood obesity is just one manifestation of a much larger problem. We are not just seeing children with obesity, we are seeing children with type 2 diabetes, we are seeing children with fatty liver disease, we are seeing children with cognitive decline, we are seeing children with polycystic ovarian syndrome, we are seeing children with depression. There is a host of disorders that are manifest now that were not manifest 50 years ago. And the fact is that all of these diseases are diseases of adults, but they're now occurring in children because children are the canaries in the coal mine. So whatever's going on in the adult population just affects the child even more, because the child does not have the defenses to be able to manage those insults. What I can say is that every single disease that I just laid down, just mentioned, are the diseases of mitochondria, the little energy burning factories inside each of our cells. When your mitochondria can't process energy in the form of glucose or in the form of starch, in the form of fructose, which is specific to sugar, the sweet part of sugar, in the form of ketones for that matter. When it can't process energy, then number one, the cell starves, which makes you sick. And number two, the substrate has to divert. And in the case of the liver, that diversion ends up being fat. And in the brain, that diversion ends up as glycogen. And the brain is not supposed to have glycogen, but it does if you are sick. And so the combination of the cell starving and the cell diverting energy to storage forms is what's driving pretty much every single chronic metabolic disease on the planet today. So obesity is a problem, but obesity is just one manifestation of a much larger problem.
Thank you for explaining that. That's fantastic. We want to know, tell us, when do parents should become concerned about their children saying, this is time now, it's not just normal overweight, it's not something that is trivial, this is becoming obesity category, BMI is now over something. Where do you place that threshold that parents should become concerned, and how would they go about addressing it?
Well, so one of the problems that we have is assessing the disease process itself. If you go to the pediatrician's office, they will fill out a growth chart. And the growth chart basically plots height and weight. And what that will tell you is whether or not there's excess adiposity. And we normally routinely categorize that in this index that you mentioned called BMI, body mass index. And this basically tells you how much fat versus how much lean mass. And I agree that that is what it says. However, not all fat is the same. Turns out there are 3 fat depots, 3, count them, 3, and they do not contribute to illness at the same level. The first fat, the obvious fat, the majority of what you're measuring when you stand on the scale, is known as subcutaneous fat, or big butt fat, if you will. Okay? As in, does this bathing suit make me look fat? That fat. Okay? It turns out that subcutaneous fat is actually metabolically neutral. It's metabolically inert. It is not contributing to disease. Second fat depot, visceral fat, as in big belly fat, okay, where you accumulate it here. And you as a physician understand the medical consequences of a disorder called Cushing's syndrome. You can have that visceral fat even in normal weight people. And we actually have a name for this disorder. It's called TOFI, T-O-F-I, thin on the outside, fat on the inside, real medical term. And then finally, the third fat depot, which is the most egregious and the most worrisome, is liver fat. Liver fat, you know, how much does your liver weigh? It weighs about 3 pounds. But the fact is, if your liver is storing fat, doesn't matter what else is happening in the subcutaneous or in the visceral fat component. And this is what we see often in Asian Americans, that they're actually thin, but that they have enormous amounts of liver fat. And the reason is because from a genetic standpoint, they don't have the fat cells to put the excess energy into. And so even though they're thin by BMI standards, they're actually sick from liver fat. So we still have a lot of work to do to try to figure out who's who. When you see a patient in the clinic, how do you determine which patient has the fat where? And that's still in progress.
Thank you for explaining that. And thank you for explaining the types of fat. Of the 3 fats you mentioned, are there any dangerous? Are there any good fats? Are there the fats we should be more concerned about in children compared to adults? That's part of the question. And then the second part of the question is, how do we keep an eye on them? Do we need to get a body scan with a doctor to get an assessment of them? Or is that even necessary? And you could say, well, if you keep your levels of BMI at that level, you're generally in a safe zone.
Right. So the short answer to that is that it can be sometimes very hard to monitor that. Mm-hmm. What I can say is that subcutaneous fat is not the problem. However, at a certain point, you basically fill up that subcutaneous fat depot, and then you start spilling over into visceral fat. And so the two often congregate together. Part of the reason is because those 3 fat depots have different causes. So subcutaneous fat, as I mentioned, 50% genetic, okay? And calories can contribute to subcutaneous fat, and I don't argue that. But again, it's the least concerning from a metabolic health standpoint. Visceral fat is almost all stress and cortisol, okay? And the question is, how do you measure stress? And how do you measure cortisol? Those are very difficult to do, especially in children. And then finally, liver fat. That's actually the easiest one to measure. So, number 1, waist circumference. That's cheap and free. Number 2, an ALT, alanine aminotransferase, which is part of a standard chem panel. What happened is that everyone has liver fat. Okay? 45% of America has fatty liver disease. The entire curve shifted to the right. And so the cutoff point has changed. The fact of the matter is that an ALT of 25 is the cutoff. And so there are a lot of people with liver fat who don't know it and have been told by their doctors that everything's fine. So that's actually one of the easier ones to determine. And then finally, the last test that really, I think, personally is the most important and needs to be done not just in adults but in children as well, and should be done on a yearly basis and needs to be covered by insurance, is a fasting insulin level. Now, that currently is not covered. And I think that is an egregious miscarriage of justice. And the reason it's not covered is because the American Diabetes Association says don't draw a fasting insulin level. So how come they say don't draw a test, and I say it's the most important test you can get and you should have it every year?
Part of the problem, I guess, is adults are busy, parents are busy, children, they're got a lot to do. They're busy themselves as well. They're preoccupied with everything.
Yep.
So they're taking the shortcuts. Hard to prepare meals, hard to go for good, real food.
Right.
That's where ultra-processed or some of the foods come in.
Yes.
Explain to us give us some examples of good foods that we can tell our children to use on a regular basis that when they look at it and say, I don't want to eat fish. I don't want to have, they go for those processed foods because they're easy to get, readily available, and the appetite, they're very fulfilling and very addictive as well. Want to hear from you, Robert. Robert, give us some examples that we can give our parents and children, say, guys, this is good for you, this is not.
Yes. So the first thing is you said the word addictive. That's correct. Sugar, the fructose molecule, is the sweet molecule in sugar, is addictive. And so that's why the food industry adds so much sugar to the various foods, because they know when they add it, you buy more. So the amount of added sugar on the side of the package is extraordinarily important. Okay? Basically, you should eat foods that do not have added sugar. Now, are there foods that are still ultra-processed that are devoid of added sugar? And the answer is yes, there are. Now, there are diet sweeteners. Now, I'm not going to tell you they're good. They're also bad, but they're bad for different reasons. You know, the easy way to explain it is the toxicity of one Coca-Cola equals the toxicity of 2 Diet Coca-Colas. Half as bad. The other thing that is extraordinarily important is the fiber content of the food. Now, people think fiber is what you throw in the garbage after you juice the fruit. Turns out the fiber is exceedingly important from a metabolic health standpoint. Now, people say, wait a second, you don't digest fiber, you don't metabolize fiber. The fiber stays in your intestine, it never enters your bloodstream. How can it be important? And the answer is because the fiber is not the food for you. The fiber is the food for your bacteria, for your microbiome. And your microbiome basically tells the rest of the body through various chemicals and also through nerves what's going on in terms of inflammation. And the goal is to keep the microbiome happy so that the microbiome does not feed on you. And the more fiber you consume, the happier your microbiome is, the less inflammation. And the less inflammation, the less insulin resistance, the less your fasting insulin goes up. And most importantly, the less you'll need to eat, because fiber is satiating. So when you consume a high fiber diet, that's the equivalent of consuming a low carbohydrate diet in terms of keeping insulin down and keeping mitochondria healthy. When you eat fruit, you're doing fine. So
Excellent.
Are there ways to get real whole fruit to kids? Well, go to any soccer game. That's what they're eating. They're eating oranges. Great, terrific. I have no problem with that. There's an example. That'll work.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. Eat real foods, whole foods, and unprocessed clean foods. And that's the key. Whether you have fruits, you have vegetables, you have carrots, you have wherever your interest is.
Indeed.
Excellent. Thank you for explaining that. We want to jump on to the next topic. I know we're running out of time. One of them that has come about and a great association is sleep. Obesity, sleep,
Yes.
diet, and our children being So in a different mindset and different culture, sleep is the last thing they want to do.
Yes.
And it's one of the most important thing. Explain to our audience, Robert, how is important and how can we fix this?
So sleep is essential. Okay? If you don't sleep, you die. It's that simple. 4 days, you're dead. Okay? You have to sleep. The question is, what is sleep good for? Why do you need to sleep? And people didn't know the answer to that, but we actually do now. It basically allows the brain to get rid of all the junk that's been that developed over the course of the previous 24 hours. I like to call sleep garbage night for the brain. And so it's really, really important to get enough sleep. The problem is, number one, there are chemicals in our food that basically interfere with that, the most important one being caffeine. Okay, that interferes with it. And the second issue is that cell phones, because of the blue light, actually interfere with sleep. My colleague, Christine Mattson at the UC Berkeley, did a study where she showed that kids who sleep in the same room as their cell phone is charging get 28 minutes less sleep per night than kids where the cell phone is charging in another room, even though they're not using the cell phone, just from the blue light.
Robert, the next section is about some rapid fire questions, and it's like and or an or, like an or. I would just this choice, we give you two choices, and we want you to know what would you recommend or what's your choice, so we can just have a section out there drawn out for our viewers as well. So if you're ready, I can start that.
Go ahead.
What's more dangerous, lack of sleep or ultra processed food?
I think ultra processed food.
What's more important, healthy food or good exercise?
Healthy food.
Which should be cut first, sugar or screen time?
Sugar.
Which is worse for children, sedentary lifestyle or junk food?
Junk food.
Which has a bigger impact on health, sleep quality or diet quality?
Diet quality.
Yeah, I was going to say that, yes, because sleep, they both have, but diet supersedes definitely over the other. Interesting. Thank you very much. One of the most powerful messages from this conversation being childhood obesity is not simply about willpower or personal responsibility.
Indeed.
The good news is that small changes can make a big, meaningful difference and impact. And whether it's more movement, better sleep, or as you phrased it, fewer ultra-processed foods and more real food, they all are important. What a remarkable journey we've just experienced together. The path to health isn't always straight, but it's always worth the effort. I hope today's conversation inspired you to take the next step in your wellness journey, armed with new knowledge and a fresh perspective. If today's episode left you inspired, share it with people, someone who need to hear this. Give us a thumbs up and your opinion. Keep exploring, keep evolving, and we'll see you in the next episode of Khan Klinics.